Another familiar face to many in industry is our next speaker, David Brass. David is from a mixed family farm background. David graduated from Newcastle University in 1980, and prior to his involvement in the egg sector, he was a pilot in the in the Royal Air Force for 10 years. David then retired from the Royal Air Force and started his egg business in conjunction with his wife, Helen. David, in my view, has used his experience, not least in the RAF, but other experiences to apply innovation and efficiency in his business, the Lakes Free Range Egg Company, which Helen and David established in 1996. So I think what David and Helen and the team are achieving at the Lakes is a good example to the sector, and I think that it makes David a very worthy contributor to our program today. And in terms of achievement, in terms of recognition of those experiences and what the Lakes have achieved, David and the business are current holders of the Queen's Award for Industry in Sustainable Development, and David is also a past recipient of the Farmers Weekly Poultry Farmer of the Year Award, not just once, but twice, of course. So without any further ado, we're very keen to welcome David to the stage to give us his insight into innovation and efficiency. David.
Thank you, Gary. That's a hard introduction to follow, I guess. It must be in the name. I agree entirely with the two Davids. Everything they've said exactly about innovation and where it fits into the big scheme of things. I'll do a little bit about us and a bit more to the coalface, I guess, at a farm-type level and the excitement that's out there, the things that's out there that need agriculture to actually get involved with academia, to turn academic research into practical farm knowledge. By and large, an awful lot of the finance that the academia get nowadays come from having farmer partners. So that's the nice place, a lovely place to be. This is us, nice little lake district. As Gary mentioned, we're a mid-sized egg packer, about 350 million eggs a year. New factory, moved into there about 10 years ago. And trying to go with the whole ethos of what we do, environmental, ethical, sustainable agriculture. And the new factory kind of exhibits that, like we mentioned earlier with David, lots and lots of robots everywhere. All the usuals if you get in that greywater harvesting, biomass, solar panels, all that sort of stuff. Achieve carbon neutrality in what it does in 2016. I can't quite say that nowadays because we've added a lot more equipment, but as we keep growing massively, kind of lucky really, the market's moved to where we are. With the sustainable sort of market has come our direction in the last 30 years, so lucky really. To us at the coalface, what does innovation mean? It's doing something new, it's doing something better than we're doing now, and be it that production or welfare, usually both. For me, and I guess a lot of people in the room, the beauty of working in poultry is, if you abuse an animal as small as that, it doesn't produce for you. You have to give better welfare. Every single thing you do to improve the welfare, certainly of laying birds, will give you more production. So it's a win-win. I hate the term, but it's a win-win. But it has risk. If it doesn't have a little bit of risk, financial risk or risk of going wrong, I don't actually class it as innovation. Doing the same thing somebody's done 10 years ago is not really innovation. But what it does, and again, David mentioned earlier, it actually gives you tools to manage better. It doesn't get rid of and then that's the public perception, it gets rid of the stockman. It doesn't, it just gives him better tools. It upskills the stockman, it gives him more tools to work with. And I have my little analogy. I always have an analogy, and this one is the ladders. And what we had over the last 50, 60 years is the ladder on the left. Big steps at the bottom in the 50s and 60s when massive production from genetics, from feed, from breeds, year on year. But gradually that's got smaller as the years go on. Those little steps every now smaller nowadays. How to get onto the new ladder, the new big steps, and where we're going with that. And nothing to say that all those things aren't important still, especially genetics. But we need to look at other ways of doing things. And to my mind, it's going down the artificial intelligence, blockchain, data systems type route. And with that, at a farm level, with my farmer's hat on, I'm thinking the sensors have to gather the data. Because I'm a farmer, I know what it's like. Farmers on a good day report the right stuff, and if it's a bad day, they don't. And so how can you make management decisions on that? And that's just a fact, we just do, we're people. So if sensors can record that automatically, it's right data, real time, all the time. And things like acoustics, a couple of the examples I'm going to mention particularly are things like acoustics I'm really interested in, and thermal imaging, which I think has massive potential on farm as well. And while I'm here, I'm going to take the opportunity to thank a few people in the room. Andrew and Mark from BIC, FAI in York, the Lane and Welfare Forum, Sainsbury's, McDonald's, Beef Repper, Hendrix Genetics, RSPCA Sherwood, and most of the vets in the room actually also gave us letters of support for a thermal imaging BBSSA application that we've actually received. So I can announce that today we've received that funding, £7 million worth. And we wouldn't have got it without the support of industry, so thank you very much. A completely new age of where we're going to. A couple of questions before we get there, and I'd like to ask the audience, maybe you can answer, maybe you can't. Our first flock through a modern free range in 1989 was 8.2% mortality. What was the national average last year in the UK? Around about 8%. So in 30 years, we've achieved absolutely nothing. And I know some of you in the room will say, yeah, we're getting 50 more eggs, so I can quite understand that, but that doesn't mean to say it's not a reason. Somebody mentioned earlier on, David mentioned earlier on about, somebody says, no, it's not a solution, it's ask another question. And how do you know a chicken is ill, which is probably even more important? Lots of people in the room, how do you know a chicken's ill? By and large, you find it dead on the floor. Am I right? You can see a few trends, but by and large, when you start finding them dead on your floor, they ring the vet to do something about it. That's got to be wrong in the 21st century. We need to be looking at ways of gathering information before it ever gets to that stage. Digital diagnosis before it ever gets to that stage. So if we marry the new technology with good management skills, we'll end up, hopefully, not answering all the questions, but at least putting some answers to those questions. A couple little examples here that I thought might be interesting, some maybe don't know about. What does a chick say? What can a chick say on day one of its life? Cheep. That's it. Cheep, 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 cheep. That's all it can say. If it says that on the first day of its life for half an hour, it's asking for its mum. Mum, mum, where are you, mum? I've lost you, mum. Where are you, mum? If it does it on the second day of its life, it's stressed. So at 37 days, it'll have more mortality and less weight, because on the second day of its life, it's going cheep, cheep, cheep for more than half an hour. And if the point-of-lay pullets at 16 weeks, less evenness, more mortality. Why aren't we using that? Avian influenza, University of Tehran work of all places actually about 7 years ago, diagnosing avian influenza with listening to chickens, just listening to what the chickens are saying, vocabulation. So there's avian influenza, infectious bronchitis, ART, Newcastle disease. You can diagnose all of them just by listening to what your chicken's telling you. A little bit of work that we're just doing at the moment in Newcastle actually is adult vocabulary, 26 different sounds that a chicken makes as an adult. We've only got 11 of them identified as yet, but you all know, if you're stockman, you can tell there's something wrong in the chicken shed before you ever go in the shed by the way the birds sound. Can we utilize that to give us warnings? It doesn't solve the problem, but it gives you warnings to say there's something on your chicken shed you maybe need to look at. And really new work, we've only just got the initial details on actually, is the pitch of chickens make. And it's logic when the scientists point it out to you, it's actually logic. If somebody's chasing you with a shotgun, the adrenaline goes up and your voice goes up, the pitch gets higher. It's exactly the same with a chicken. But they tell you before they're going to smother in a big heap in the middle of the afternoon, before they start feather quaking each other, days before, they'll start raising the pitch of the sounds they're making. And that can last all the way through a flock. And again, it's early days, we haven't done much work on it as yet. But if you have a little sound meter that monitors the chicks as they come in your point-of-lay pullets when they arrive on your farm, and you say, too high pitch, I don't want them, mate, take them away again. Could prize challenges, but it can be done. It shows you need to maybe work closer with those birds. They're going to be more stressed later on. Data system, we've gone down a route of a lot in the last 4 to 5 years and developed quite a reasonable system, we kind of hope. But when we were looking at that, my head of agriculture and myself, we needed we looked all over the planet for data systems that would actually do what we want, real-time data that we can use to make management decisions with. And the first question we asked most of these people was, what management decision have you made using your system? And most of the time they stood there and didn't know and didn't answer, because they hadn't. Because they're not designed by farmers for farmers with farmers included in the design process. They need to be real-time, because if they're not, it's historical. Your birds are dead by the time you find out that there's a problem. I already mentioned you to automate as much data as possible because the data collection is solid if you automate it. Integrate all the data sources that you've got. You don't just take the temperature and the pressure and the feed that they're eating, but the gradings for your eggs, the veterinary input that's been into that beforehand and in the previous rearing systems. Where have those birds come from? When have they traveled? All of that sort of stuff. Integrate it all into one data system. and it needs to collect seamlessly. Some of the broiler guys have big modern units. A lot of the laying units don't even have internet, and no internet connection to that. So your data system has to work. Oh, it needs internet connection. If it hasn't got it, it doesn't work, useless. So again, it needs farmer input into that. So the system we have is, it loves a wire. It loves to plug into the internet. That's its favorite home. But if it doesn't do that, it talks by Wi-Fi. It doesn't do that, it talks by GSM. The absolute worst case scenario is it's got none of those. So when you walk into the shed with your mobile phone, it's got an app on it that the computer in the corner says, you couldn't take my data out for me because I haven't talked to the internet for data. Yeah, sure, no problem. Dumps it to your phone, you walk out again, you get back into phone connectivity, and it dumps it onto the internet. So at least you have some data going out some of the time, because if it doesn't, it's a waste of time. And it's after that you need to get reports that are useful, give you what you want. And again, that's where farmers, agriculture, are getting involved in the development, because most of these are designed by, should I say tech nerds? Is that the wrong phrase? I'll probably get cut off on the microphone now. But tech nerds in the back rooms doing their development, what farmer wants, doesn't necessarily follow that he does. So it needs to communicate real good, real-time reports that give you real alerts that matter something to you as a stockman. And you can all need to look at it at the same time. So you, your vet, how many of you have got that phone call from a farmer on 2:30 on a Friday afternoon? I've got a bit of a problem with my birds. Okay, what's the problem? Well, I've got no dead chicken. You know, it's not real, whereas this, you can actually look at the real information you're getting from the system. And this is kind of what we've come up with, just one of the aspects of it, to be fair. It's a fairly simple aspect of it. But integrate all the data on one page. And just expanding that one a little bit, you can see not a particularly wonderful flock, but this was one of our own flocks, actually. It was looking at LED work on lighting for chickens, because there's not much work being done on the type of LED you need for chickens. And this particular shed, it mimicked daylight. It was full spectrum daylight plus UV. It had a sensor outside, looked at all the light daylight outside and mimicked it inside effectively. So pink in the morning, not much UV, bright in the middle of the day, lots of UV, pink at night as it gets towards dusk, and just fitted it to the daylight we were using. Problem you've got is right about here, birds coming well, 10 days early, right about here. This is, sorry for those broiler guys, this is expected egg production, is the dotted line, solid lines are green. Just about here, 84%, they started feather pecking. It's a lighting problem. So what do you do about that? You do what the vet always says you do, and right here, the purple line, you drop the light. And drop the light from about 18 lux down to about 12. And back up here, the stockman in the shed says, oh no, they're still feather pecking. So what do we do again? We drop the light some more. So you drop from 12 down to about 8. And the feather pecking stops. Production goes up. Everything's happy. This bit here, after peak, your vet will say, oh, well, that's the ones that were ill because they were feather pecked, it's peritonitis, it's that sort of thing. So some of them will die, some of them don't recover, some of them takes a while to recover. So for a few weeks afterwards, you get this production drop. Everybody's happy. That's a bog standard feather pecking issue. Look at it a bit closer. And because you've got the data, you see right here, when it dropped it the second time down, the feed consumption went down, which is the orange line, and the water consumption went down, which is the blue line. So you've now got feed and water consumption going down 10%. Right at the time, you're approaching peak for a chicken. Stockman here is going to tell you what happens with that. It crashes. So is it the fact that they'd already recovered here and we shouldn't have got that second light reduction, or is it the actual fact that it was the feather pecking in the first place? I don't know, because we haven't got many of these graphs, but when you have more of these graphs and more data, it gives you information, it gives you data at farm level to make these solid decisions. And what's really, really interesting, actually, right here. When we put the first light drop down, feed consumption within 2 days went up. So it could be that the stockman up here who said they're still feather pecking was wrong, and actually feed consumption going up is a good sign your feather pecking stops. And you leave it a week or two and they'll get over it. I don't know. But if you don't have the information, how can you make those sort of judgments, I guess? What's that sort of stuff done for us? On rearing units, we have data systems in the rear units. We've also put daylight in them. We just thought it was kind of odd. It's a bit of innovation, I guess, but also kind of odd that all the broilers in the country have daylight. The birds who are going to expect to go and see daylight never get it in rearing, but in dark sheds, and still in dark sheds. We're probably still the only rearing unit in the UK with daylight in them. And dark brooding, which basically is just little nice warm tents for the chickens to go under. It's a bit like mother hen. They go into those and it keeps them warm and more comfortable, I guess. But it reduced mortality from, I guess, we're probably industry 1.5% down to 0.38%. Massive, massive reduction in mortality, and even more so in energy. I mean, colossal energy reduction. And it's one of those things that then what you try to do is always work with your farmers. And if you have farmer meetings, you know that at the back of the room somewhere, with that awkward guy who always asks that awkward question, we had one of those. And we're saying, Roger, my head of agriculture, was saying, about you need to go and visit your pullets in Riyadh and make sure they're okay and that sort of thing. And this chirps up from the back. Why? I've got birds at 65 weeks of age. They've got every disease they're ever going to get. I'm going to go from there onto my 10-week-old pullets that have no particular vaccinations against half the disease they're supposed to have. Why should I be doing that when you've got all this data? That is absolutely right. So what we do now is, or will do, it'll all be in place within the next 12 months, is from day one of those chicks going to the farmer will have access to all of the data. It means you can't hide, but if you're doing the job correctly, why should you hide? And at the same time, with CCTV, he can watch his birds being loaded onto the truck to come to his farm. So there's no place to hide then, which is Bulleria can be a bit interesting. But if you believe in what you're doing and the data can provide the explanations for what you're doing, why not? In the laying units, it's early days. There's only 30 farms with it in at the moment, but there's a 20% fall in mortality and 11.7 more eggs. That's a big, big step on the bottom rung with the new ladder, in my opinion. I don't know if it's right, but in my opinion it is. Well, I'm actually gabbling through this because I've only got 16 minutes, but never mind. I've done another bit of innovation, a bit of where we're looking at going forward. Some of you may know about this, some of you may not. If you don't, you really well ought to be blunt about it. Agriculture is responsible for 90% of the ammonia in the atmosphere in the UK, and that's been going up. That's the only gas of any importance that's gone up since 2010. All the others, the CFCs, the ozone depletings, the carbons are all going down. Agriculture is responsible for most of this, and it's going up. The government will come after us. They are already. The new Clean Air Act is it's a bit kicked into long grass at the moment because of the election, but it will come back. And the government and that didn't say, we might think about it, we might possibly, we're looking at it. They said, we will regulate to reduce ammonia. So you need to get your heads around it. And that's where your innovation comes in again. And a lot of what we're doing, can you do the simple things now, which solves you having to do the expensive things later. And just to sort of reiterate the problem, just in case you wonder, the blue bit is where you can have a poultry unit, and it's okay. All of the rest, your greens and reds, the EU and UK limits are quite broad. And what the Northern Ireland has just done in the last couple of months is moved their planning applications rules towards the bottom end of those limits. That effectively means, the Northern Ireland guys will know that, there'll be no more poultry units in Northern Ireland because the ammonia levels that have to be there now. If that happens across the rest of the UK, we've all got a problem. And the regulations are there now, it's just how we interpret them. So again, we need to look at innovative ways of stopping that. And this is what you do now. You cover your slurry stores up, which dairy, a good thing is most of the ammonia comes from the dairy industry, actually, that's a minor detail. Or you spread you spread your slurry, inject it, or you spread your muck and then you incorporate it within 12 hours. Or you put ammonia scrubbers on the end of your shed. 100 grand for the ammonia scrubber, 20 grand a year to run it. Or the other option is you can plant a few trees. I'll leave that to you guys. But where we are with that is it's relatively simple. You plant the trees, they grow up quite tall near the shed. The plume from the shed blows downwind, and there's a green backstop at the back, stops the plume getting out the side, so it filters up, the ammonia filters up through the trees, gets rid of the ammonia and the particulates out of the air. Up to 45% after about 50 years. But actually quite quickly, within 10 years, you're getting rid of 25%. So if you think back to that 2030 reduction of 16% date, plant a few trees now, and you've got the problem solved by 2030 issue without any other issues. But what you've got to do with that is, and the problem with that is, it isn't recognised by the EA. So the Environment Agency don't recognise it. It's not best available technique. So we as an industry need to be lobbying government to make sure this is included in the Act as part of those measures that will be accepted to get rid of ammonia out of the air. It's a bit of a soapbox for me at the moment, this one, I'm afraid, but it's another one of those innovations that could be quite simple, low cost, that all could save us a massive amount of money if it's done right. But we just need to be lobbying for that. So that's the plea for today, is to lobby for that with all of your contacts, I guess. What is this counting down then? But not to worry, because I've finished.
Thank you for your insightful paper. I neglected to mention that you've got a passion for tree planting and the benefits of tree planting, not just for the environment, but for bird welfare. So thank you very much for communicating that very effectively to the delegates. I'll open it up, please, to questions from the floor for David. Yes, far left. We've got a question right at the far side. Sorry, I can't see very well from where I'm stood.
Morning, David.
Hi.
John Retson. We know each other fairly well, and I'm a wee bit further north than David. I was lucky enough to be in Australia for 2 days, and I had an interesting 2-day visit round an egg farm there, where the guy does gather a lot of data. Maybe not as much as you're going to do, but he does gather a lot. Now, he had a great system working, but he said he had to ban emails and texts to his head office before 10 in the morning, because he felt that there was so much information floating around that his bird welfare was suffering. He needed his men in these chicken sheds before they started downloading, transferring to the main office. Could you just tell us how you practically are going to post-mortem all this information? Is it done at your head office? Will it be done on site? Once you've got it done, how are you going to feed it back to get a benefit in that chicken shed?
A lot in that question. You're absolutely right. One of the first things we had was communication backwards and forwards. There's very few data systems that actually communicate backwards and forwards. It's difficult to do that technically. It's quite easy to put data out. If you communicate back, you have to sync all the systems. It's quite challenging. But that's one of the things. The other thing is at the farm level, it's relatively simple. The screens that they actually get in the chicken shed are fairly simple and intuitive. The alerts are taking a long time to develop to be reasonably accurate. So basic alerts in there that will tell you things are going wrong now to do something about it. Things like power monitoring. If you look at power monitoring, we do that in factories all the time. We don't do it in chicken sheds. You can tell somebody just monitoring detailed power consumption that the electric motor on the feeder is going to break down a month before it does. Why aren't we getting that? So you get an alert to say those sort of things are happening. Just use technology that's already out there. I like plagiarism. Plagiarism is brilliant. If somebody else has paid all the money to do it, why not just copy it? You know, the system for communication, the screen, the system is Norwegian government-based. And we're thinking if it'll work in -30 in a fjord in the middle of winter, it should work in a chicken shed. So there's those sort of systems actually within the chicken shed. We don't try to get involved as a company at all with the data if we possibly can. Just let the farmer get on with it. He's got the data to do that, which is, we've mentioned before, the challenges of doing that. It's a different skill set. Some do, some don't. But as an example as to how adaptable farmers are, one of our producers is 80 years old and he owns a Nokia. He owns a Nokia. But he just loves his data, just loves it. Once he's got his screen, and he doesn't go on the computer at all, that's not him, but they're just looking at the data he's getting on his screen every day for his production and how the graphs work together. He can see patterns that he can work with, and he's quite happy to do that. So farmer level, it works very well. At bigger picture, much bigger picture is, I think every university we've talked to is desperate for that data because it's solid, real data, minute by minute, second by second. It's real time all the time. It's not at the end of the day your bird's consumed 120 grams today. So working with a lot of universities with that on various different research projects and all these sort of acoustics and things, because you can see the effects. You can see the effects when with the feather pecking issue, all those little trends you can actually look at. And that's just some of the data. There's an awful lot more than that. It gets a bit complicated, the graphs, to be fair. So that's a long answer to a short question, I'm afraid. But
Thank you, David, and thank you, John, for the question. We've got a question on the board here from Slido. We'll come to you in a moment, Ione, if you bear with me, please. David, you do a lot of innovation work with, and you touched upon it in your presentation, with Sainsbury's and McDonald's. The question on the board, and I don't know if you can see it from the angle that you're at, is does innovation pay back in other ways than just straight cash?
if you've got JK at the back of the room, ask him. But yes, retailers more and more are wanting this sort of data. They're wanting welfare data. Compassion and people like that are chasing them. They want solid outcomes. They want antibiotic usage, not by the year, but by the month. What are you doing? What trends are you looking at to reduce that? It's become much more to the fore probably in the last 3 or 4. I think everybody will say that, though. The other Davids will say that as well, I guess. Much more to the fore in the last year or two. Very much so.
Yes, thank you. So you'd commend innovation from that point of view as well as the other benefits. Thank you. Ione, thank you for your patience.
That's okay. Good morning. Fantastic presentation. Very interesting, especially the vocalization frequency element. I really enjoyed that. My question is, in terms of pitch as an indicator of stress in the birds, what would you consider, or how would you consider that to be transferable data for application in the commercial industry? And how would we implement early intervention, if I can get my words out, strategies, should we have an issue with high pitch frequencies in the shed with the birds?
Like I said, it's very, very early days on that one. There's a lot more work to be done in that particular aspect of the science behind it. On its own, it probably won't stand up. as a single indicator. A single indicator is telling you something's happening. You need all the rest of the data and all the rest of the observations. Probably a lump of the thermal imaging that will come out of that will be really, really useful to tell you some bigger picture stuff that's happening behind the scenes, I guess.
Yeah, because if you have a shed of several thousand birds, especially in free range, surely you'd have to have vocalization detection devices scattered throughout that shed. Otherwise, it's a lot of birds shouting. How would you make sense of all that data? Sorry for the second question.
There's probably enough work for a scientist for the whole of the rest of his career in that one, to be honest. David knows this. Most of you work with science, every time you ask one question, you end up with 10 more questions. This is the problem. It varies. Some flocks, and like I said, it's early days, some flocks start out like that, and they're like that all the time. So are they just generally stressed all the time? Others, it happens just before an issue is going to happen. So that there's different patterns there. What's causing those different patterns, we don't really know. Another thing that we did is looking at rearing and where do pullets come out of rearing sheds. And it was an interesting one, talking actually with Loman and Rudy at Loman about that. If you catch the chickens first, pullets first out of a rearing shed, you probably get the quiet ones because you can catch them. The scatty ones that go up the wall, the nutcases, come out of that second. So if you get the second load after that, out of that rearing shed, you get all the nutcases. So you get one flock that's nice and placid and quiet, and the one that isn't come out of the same rearing shed. And that's not genetics, that's just the way well, it probably is genetics, but they've separated themselves out as self-selection, I guess. So you can end up with one of those that's much higher pitch because they're the nutcases all the time. And I don't know, we just need to keep working on that one, I guess. But we'll integrate, what we want to do is integrate that with the other data that we're collecting. And some things like thermal imaging will really tell us. If your chicken shed's the same temperature as it was yesterday and the chicken temperature isn't, there's a bit of a clue something's going on with the chickens, especially if you link it into the feed and water consumption, and the feed consumption's gone down, the water consumption's gone up. That will start looking at digital diagnosis. You look at dairy cows and rumen boluses and movement measures nowadays, and there's vets will tell you 6 weeks before a cow's lame, it's going to be lame and on which foot. So if you can do it with a dairy cow, you know, I know chickens are a bit small, you need more of them, but why not?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Arnie, and thank you, David. If you can turn your attention, please, David, to the board. We'll ask one final question from Slido, if we may. And this is partly to do with transparency and perhaps overdoing it. So I'll read the question out for anybody that can't see it. How much can we use innovation to open up what we do to consumers, and how much could we scare them as opposed to embracing them? Great question, I thought.
It's funny, everybody's answered that question this morning, haven't they? It's exactly the same. And I haven't even thought about it. I'm just passionate about the innovation, the new stuff, and working on the new things. I'd never thought about that until a meeting I was at a week or two ago, and one person in the audience said that, and it was Frankenstein farming, and all of a sudden it opened up my eyes to that one particularly. I was very slow to take on multi-tier chickens, very slow. I was way behind the rest of the industry, 5 years behind the rest of the industry, because I thought public perception was wrong. Public perception would look at that and think, oh, that's industrial, we don't like that. And actually, when you show public around and you explain to them and say, well, you know, this is what the reality of farming is. You can pay £20 a dozen if you want and have 5 chickens running around in a farmyard, but if you wanted a realistic cost of price, that's what you have to have, and it's a balance of welfare. They understand it. I think we just have to be really sharp with our messaging. So it isn't Frankenstein farming, it's giving our farmers the welfare tools to improve what they're doing.
Okay, thank you. David, thank you very much for your excellent paper. A round of applause, please.
Thank you.
That brings us to our coffee break. We are running a little bit behind schedule, so if you can be back in the room for 11:30. I would like to thank our sponsor of the coffee break, which is International Water Solutions. Thank you very much to them. Please, if you've got time, visit the trade stands. There's plenty of products and services available that those trade stands would like to engage with you. So please, see you back at 11:30. Thank you very much.